You are watching the World 24/7 on the NDTV network. I'm Parmeshwar Bawa. We've got an action-packed bulletin lined up for you. Let's begin with the top stories we're tracking at the moment. An Israeli attack in Beirut has killed at least 22 people and wounded 117 others as strikes move away from Hezbollah strongholds in the city's suburbs and into the heart of the Lebanese capital. Wafiq Safa, the chief of Hezbollah's liaison and coordination unit, survived an assassination attempt as per reports. Israel's security cabinet has met to vote on the country's response to Iran's October 1st missile attack as per reports. Russia's President Vladimir Putin is set to meet with Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian for the first time this week to discuss the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. Announcing a 10-point plan while underlining that dialogue and cooperation between India and ASEAN are of utmost importance at a time of conflict and tension in many parts of the world, Prime Minister Modi flagged respect for each other's national integrity and sovereignty at the India-ASEAN Leaders Summit in Laos. More than 3 million homes and businesses were without power as Hurricane Milton continues to pull away from Florida and the United States as a Category 1 storm after spawning multiple tornadoes and major flooding as it moved through the state overnight. United States' lead over China on the Fortune 500 podium this year reflects the revenue challenges facing Beijing's state-owned companies, according to a new analysis. The US reclaimed the top spot with 139 firms on the corporate heavyweights list compared to China's 128. Our big focus: an Israeli attack in Beirut has killed at least 22 people and wounded 117 others as strikes move away from Hezbollah strongholds in the city's suburbs and into the heart of the Lebanese capital. Wafiq Safa, the chief of Hezbollah's liaison and coordination unit, has survived an assassination attempt as per multiple reports. But Israel's airstrikes in Lebanon have displaced hundreds of thousands of people across the country over the past 3 weeks alone. And the Israeli military's warnings of looming operations have sent thousands more fleeing for safety. Meanwhile, an Israeli strike on a school sheltering displaced people in the Gaza Strip killed at least 27 people, including a child, and 7 women, with the toll likely to rise, as per Palestinian medical officials. Israel has continued to strike at what it says are militant targets across the Palestinian enclave, even as attention has shifted to its war against Hezbollah in Lebanon and rising tensions with Iran. But the military launched a large-scale air and ground operation against Hamas in northern Gaza just earlier this week. And Israel's security cabinet has convened to vote on a proposal to authorize Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant to determine the country's response to last week's Iranian missile attack. Israel's security cabinet is voting, along with the defense minister, to determine the response to Iran's missile barrage. Netanyahu, though, had spoken over the phone to US President Joe Biden and his Vice President Kamala Harris on Israel's procedure against Iran. Meanwhile, I must point out, and you must note, it seems the divisions inside the Israeli government and across the Atlantic are converging, as many analysts have highlighted, with Netanyahu apparently incensed over his lack of direct contact with Joe Biden and a cabinet rivalry overshadowing Israel's security deliberations. In fact, Israel's defense minister and Netanyahu's tensions are coming to the fore. By the way, the Israeli defense minister hails from Netanyahu's own party, but the two have found themselves frequently at odds as Israel's war has expanded from Gaza to Yemen to Lebanon and now possibly to Iran. Divisions inside the Israeli government, as well as between Netanyahu and the White House, are converging at a critical moment for the Middle East, and Jerusalem has vowed a significant retaliation for Tehran's second-ever direct attack on the Jewish state. The other big development we are tracking, Russia's President Vladimir Putin is set to meet with Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian for the first time this week to discuss the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. Now, Moscow and Tehran have grown closer since Russia invaded Ukraine, with the two countries planning to sign a strategic partnership agreement as Iran continues to send weapons to Russia. Putin, by the way, has a calendar full of diplomatic engagements as he seeks to evade Russia's Western-imposed diplomatic isolation, including playing host to more than 24 world leaders at the BRICS summit later this month. To understand the ramifications better, we have with us from Tehran former PRO of the Iran consulate, Saeed Tamjid Haider, who's also an expert on Iran affairs. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. Now, Iran and Russia have in the last months put aside centuries of regional rivalry going back to the imperial era to, let's say, focus on a shared confrontation with the West. So would you argue that this growing alliance is increasingly troubling the West as tensions reach new highs in the Middle East?
First of all, good morning to you and thanks for inviting. Yes, obviously, Russia and Iran have progressively deepened their ties, particularly in the context of their respective global isolations. So this mutual agreement and the cooperation agreements between Iran and Russia will not only bother the Western hegemony, but also will influence the multipolar world, which we are, which is undoubtedly a focal point in these scenarios in the Middle East mostly. And this meeting at the forum in Turkmenistan, which is happening today, wherein the presidents of Iran and Russia is meeting, is a continuation of the strategic alliance between Moscow and Tehran, which includes military, economic, trade, and geopolitical cooperation. So this mutually beneficial relationship demonstrates strategic alignment in challenging Western dominance, especially the US and NATO influence in the region.
Right. But sir, do you agree that Russia and Iran's cozy relationship may actually have a limit? In a sense, their partnership is limited by Russia's desire to avoid harming its ties to Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Israel?
No, I don't think so. Russia is actually playing a very safe game in the region because Russia has also suffered the isolation by the Western powers, and Russia is looking to build ties in the region. They don't. The Russia doesn't want to build tensions, and in turn, Russia wants to build relationships with the region. The Russia is playing in such a way that even it has good relations with Iran. Which he's looking which Russia is looking as an ally, and building relationships, and also not to have trouble with the Iranian counterparts, which are in the region like Saudi and other countries. So Russia is playing a very safe game to looking for its own interest rather than concentrating on the local conflict in the region.
Well, the relationship, many analysts and geopolitical watchers actually point out that it runs much deeper than transactional ties, and Russia and Iran are increasingly reliant on each other, not just for their gain for their countries, but also for their regime survival. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us with those quick comments on NDTV.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
In other crucial news, Prime Minister Modi attended the 21st ASEAN-India Summit in Laos. And at the summit, Prime Minister Modi announced a 10-point plan to strengthen ASEAN-India comprehensive partnership and asserted that ties with the regional grouping were critical for Asia's future. Meanwhile, our Prime Minister also met Shigeru Ishiba, the new Prime Minister of Japan, on the sidelines of the summit. Listen to what the Prime Minister had to say, followed by my colleague Kadambani's report.
मेरा मानना है कि 21वीं सदी एशियन सेंचुरी भारत और आसियान देशों की सेंचुरी है। आज जब विश्व के कई हिस्सों में संघर्ष और तनाव की स्थिति है, तब भारत और आसियान की मित्रता, समन्वय, संवाद और सहयोग बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण है। आसियान की सफल अध्यक्षता के लिए मैं लाओ पीडीआर के प्रधानमंत्री सोनसाई सिपांदोन को हार्दिक बधाई देता हूं। मुझे विश्वास है कि आज की हमारी बैठक भारत और आसियान साझेदारी में नए आयाम जोड़ेगी। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in Lao PDR to attend ASEAN-India Summit as well as East Asia Summit. In the opening statement, he talked about how India is closely linked with these ASEAN countries. He's talked about being neighbors. He's talked about being friends in global south, as well as how these countries are peace-loving while there is so much conflict going around in the world. This is a statement of India's commitment towards ASEAN-India relationship, because there is these countries are not only strategically important, have ancient ties with India, but also in context of global south as well as South China Sea and Indo-Pacific. So this is a very important visit, and PM has tried to cement this relationship even further. He has announced a 10-point plan to strengthen India-ASEAN comprehensive partnership. Now this plan is quite important, and this is also, he has said that these ties with the regional groupings were critical to guiding Asia's future, because he has said that 21st century is Asia's century. So apart from people-centric celebrations such as youth summit or music festival, there are also some really other very critical areas which have seen some critical announcements, like $5 million for enhancing disaster resilience. Also initiation of a new health minister's track towards building health resilience. Now the topic for this ASEAN-India summit is of course resilience, that will translate into supply chain resilience as well as connectivity, which India is very keen about. He has also talked about cyber policy dialogue towards strengthening digital and cyber resilience. Now this is something on which all these countries are very keen, given the cyber scams and several crimes in this field. The joint statement talks about not only cyber but also AI, fintech and other issues which all these countries have been facing together. During this summit, there were also at least two bilaterals on the sidelines, with one with the PM of Japan, the newly elected PM of Japan, and the PM of New Zealand.
Well, let's switch tracks now. US inflation is still cooling, but not as quickly as expected. The Consumer Price Index, a key inflation indicator that measures the cost of goods and services, slowed in September to an annual 2.4%, as per the Bureau of Labor Statistics reported. While that metric shows a decline from August, good news for the economy, it missed market expectations by 0.1%. Inflation in the United States dropped last month to its lowest point since it first began surging more than 3 years ago, adding to a spate of encouraging economic news in the closing weeks of the presidential race there. To understand what this means better, we have with us Badri Narayanan Gopalakrishnan, fellow from the Niti Aayog and also affiliate faculty member at Boston College. Thank you so much, sir, for making time for us. Taken as a whole, the September figures show that inflation is steadily easing back to the Fed's 2% target. But, sir, the greater concern, is it to avoid stoking unemployment while reaching that target?
Well, thank you again for having me here. Yes, the inflation has been falling, in fact, quite rapidly. If you look at the last 2 years, from 2021, like you said, from 6% to in the range of 6% to 2.4% now. But on the other hand, you also see the latest jobs report last week. It also showed increase in jobs by 250,000 people, like 250,000 people. So there is, it's all good news. We have inflation, coming down and employment increasing. But again, like you rightly said, it is not as rapidly falling as market was expecting. And even the Fed's target is 2%, and we are still at 2.4%. So we may expect the Fed to continue reducing the interest rates in the coming months, as far as I can imagine, because we still. I mean, we should also think of the levels. Basically, we are talking about inflation. Inflation is just relative to last year's prices, but in the last 2 years, the prices have increased so much that you can think of this as also correction, which means the inflation should fall much more. The CPI should decrease more, actually decrease or maybe increase much more. 2.2% would be more comfortable, or even less than 2% because of the levels of prices that have been very high recently.
So, cooling inflation, then solid hiring and healthy growth. Could it erode Donald Trump's advantage on the economy in the presidential campaign as measured by public opinion polls? What's your take?
Yeah, like I said, there are a lot to be, deciphered by looking into the numbers, right? Cooling inflation is a good thing, but then the price levels are still high, so the people are still worried about that. From a political perspective, that is an important thing, and that's what the presidential campaign on both sides is talking about. Like on one side, like the Democrats are saying that we have eased down. The Republicans are saying that the price levels are high, right? So that is one aspect. And an employment increase is definitely a good news. It cannot be denied by anyone. So yes, I agree with you. But also I think economy is just one aspect that goes into the presidential debates, as you know. There are many other aspects. So I can say that employment is good news for the Democrats, but inflation is not. They still cannot declare victory yet. But it's really it's going towards that.
Thank you so much, sir, for joining us with your comments on NDTV 24/7. We will, of course, revert to you for regular updates in the run-up to November's showdown in the United States. Meanwhile, the United States' lead over China on the Fortune 500 podium this year reflects the revenue challenges facing Beijing state-owned companies, according to a new analysis. The United States reclaimed the top spot with 139 firms on the corporate heavyweights list compared to China's 128. But the big picture, while China is still in post-pandemic recovery mode, the United States slipped those chains a while ago. But here's a stunning statistic for you. Women comprised only 5.6% of CEOs at these firms. That's just down 28 leaders, down from 29 last year. The United States is home to 15 companies with female CEOs, and France is in second place with 4. Well, at least 14 people have died after Hurricane Milton devastated portions of Florida, leaving residents waking up to survey the damage there. Milton made landfall as a Category 3 hurricane on Wednesday night, bringing multiple tornadoes, waves, strong winds, heavy rainfall, and a devastating storm surge as well. More than 3.3 million homes and businesses in Florida have been left powerless, with those in the west central region the worst impacted, while evacuation alerts were blasted out to millions.
We moved a lot of stuff out this morning, so what we had.